Hey, what's up, everybody? Listen. Hit like, hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. You know the deal. And let's just get after it. Hi, hello, and welcome to your favorite Average Good podcast. Call it what you want. I'm Jimmy Conrad, not alongside Tony Miola. He had a flight cancellation, or Charlie Davies. Apparently, he's at Disney World with his family. So we brought in the man, the myth, the legend, Paul Tenorio from The Athletic. Paul, what's up, man? Great to see you.
Oh, it's great to be here, man. And you know, I'm not trying to big time you here. Like, you know, Charlie might be away at an expensive vacation doing some important things. You know, Tony's on a PJ somewhere, I'm sure, you know. No, it's good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always good to have your voice on the show. And we're breaking down the roster. The U.S. men's national team roster for the October window has been dropped. So I'm just going to name the names, the 26 players that got announced here, and then we can start to break it down. Paul, cool? We good with that order? Hopefully everybody
let's go for it.
Well, okay, we'll start in the back with the goalkeepers. We got 4 coming in this time around. Chris Brady, bit of a surprise. I'll give a little bit of commentary. It's any of the names. Matt Freese, Patrick Schulte back in the mix, and Matt Turner. Chris, 2 Matts and a Patrick. Those are proper goalkeeper names. All right, here we go to the defenders. Max Arfson, he's in the team. Cameron Carter-Vickers back in for the first time in a while, I think since March in the Nations League. Alex Freeman still doing his thing on the right side. Mark McKenzie is in. Tim Ream is in. Chris Richards. Antonee Jedi Robinson is back in the mix. And Miles Robinson is also involved. Okay, we're going to get into that in a little bit. Midfielders. Let's click it over to the midfielders in case you didn't see or hear it. Brendan Aronson, Diego Luna, Weston McKennie, Aiden Morris, Christian Roldan, James Sands, Tanner Tessman, Malik Tillman being considered more of a midfielder than one of the forwards, which is interesting. No Tyler Adams.
This will be an interesting one to discuss. I got a lot to say about the midfield.
Good. I'm glad. We're going to get into that. No Tyler Adams. Apparently, he is on the cusp of having his second baby, or his wife is on the cusp of having it, and he is not going to be involved in this one. So for everybody that was screaming, where's Tyler? Now you know. Okay, forwards. Let's get into it. Patrick Agyemang, Folarin Balogun, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Alex Zendejas, friend of the show, was on earlier this week, and Haji Wright coming off a brace against Millwall yesterday. So what do we say? What are your initial thoughts? Or actually, let me say notable absences first, because then we can get into thoughts. Serginho Dest, not part of the team, injury. He's got an injury. Joe Scally, completely healthy, not involved. Tyler Adams, as I mentioned, personal reasons. Gio Reyna, out injured. Yunus Musah, healthy, not involved. Johnny Cardoso hurts. Ricardo Pepi hurt. Josh Sargent, healthy, not involved. Okay, Paul, we got the names. We got some notable absences. Where would you like to start with this? If you want to take midfield, let's go midfield first, and then because for me, goalkeepers, we can wait to hear Big Tones' take on the goalkeepers.
Yeah.
Why we have 4. So we'll wait. We're gonna hold that one for everybody. Defenders, I'll go second on that, but let's go to midfielders because I want to hear your thoughts on that, Paul. You seem very eager to jump into the midfielders.
Well, I think it's a microcosm of this roster in the overall picture. Like, I think this team was what we were all kind of waiting for. Of, are we going to get a better idea of what Pochettino's World Cup squad looks like, right? And I think this midfield is an indication that, yes, that is the case. That being said, some of the omissions due to injury mean that maybe we don't really know where the pecking order is, right? Because if Cardoso is healthy, if Tyler Adams' baby was born 2 weeks ago instead of coming up this week, then maybe we don't have some of the names we have. And so this means that this window is also a huge opportunity for guys like Aiden Morris, Tanner Tessman, Christian Roldan to grab hold of that job, to say, I belong on the World Cup roster. And I think also for Weston McKennie to show that he can be a guy that Mauricio Pochettino counts on. This is his first time back in the team since the disaster in March. And I really feel like that player in particular, that Weston McKennie, has been kind of a guy that Mauricio Pochettino is saying, show me what you've got, earn it back. And so this for me is a huge camp for Weston McKennie, and how he performs probably shapes the midfield when we start talking about next summer. You know, if Weston's out, this midfield looks totally different than if Weston's in.
No, 100%. And we're going to hear from Mauricio Pochettino here in a second. But I want to talk. Well, let me get into the midfielders. I agree with you as well. And in terms of opportunity, this is as good as it gets for some of these players. I mean, Aiden Morris, obviously playing well from Middlesbrough, and now he gets a chance. It's one thing to be clamoring for, and hey, this guy deserves the opportunity, but he still has to fit into the puzzle that Mauricio Pochettino is putting together. And I think Weston McKennie is a good example of that. Obviously talented, but is he ticking all the boxes from the coaching staff? And we could probably agree that he hasn't been, and that's why he hasn't been called in recently. Yunus Musah being left off, excuse me, a bit of a surprise. I thought we were going to see him in. He was all a lock for us in one of our previews for the roster. And maybe something happened in March too. I don't know if you have any info with regard to Yunus Musah's position or standing or status within the team. But yeah, I'm pretty surprised he's not involved, especially because he can play multiple positions. Gioreno, not surprised. I mean, even if he was healthy, I don't think you'd bring him in. But yeah, so big opportunity. Excuse me. Tanner Tessman, I think, huge opportunity. And when I look at this team, Aiden Morris, of course, James Sands is another one. With Tyler out, and do you think he's going to go with the back three?
I think so, and I think that's a big deal for James Sands, right? Because you're a guy, and James Sands and Tanner Tessman, he hasn't played in the back line, but he certainly has the profile of a guy who could drop into the back line if needed in a back three. But James Sands has played center back in a back three before, and so it's worth taking a look at him, because when you get to World Cup time, it's not always just about who are my best 26 players or even who are the closest 26 players. Sometimes it's, okay, well, if we bring James Sands, we can bring one fewer center back. And if we can bring one fewer center back, we can bring an extra forward, or we can bring an extra winger, or whatever area where maybe there's a guy who's a little bit closer, you think, to helping you than that fourth center back. So, that's where some of these dynamics get interesting.
Yeah.
I do think Yunus Musah is an interesting one. Remember, there were two players who opted out of the Gold Cup in the summer, Christian and Yunus Musah. And one of those guys is maybe the best player in Serie A right now. Yeah. And the other guy went from a big club to a smaller club, had a nice Champions League performance the other day, was able to set up a goal. Great. But when you listen to Mauricio Pochettino talking today, part of it was like, hey, don't ask me. When he was asked about Musah's absence and Scalli's absence, his answer was kind of like, look, if I'm leaving out Messi or Pelé or Maradona, you can question me. But otherwise, like, these are just the answer was kind of like, these are just guys, these are just guys.
These are just basic guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Musah's in an interesting spot, but, and he's in an interesting spot, right? Poch brought one right back. Musah's a guy who can play right back, and he still wasn't on the team.
Okay. Because you teed it up and you brought up what Mauricio Pochettino said earlier today, we actually have some sound from him on not explaining selection decisions that are a little bit outside of what you'd said before. So let's hear what Coach Pochettino had to say.
In my philosophy, in our philosophy, or in the way that I grow, feeling that sport, player no need to know. And if the player need to know, is because they don't really feel that sport in the way that I feel. That doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. Because you really know when you play why you play, and when you don't play, you also deep down you know why. The players that they were not called today, they need to be desperate to perform better and to do better and to improve. But that is the exigence in the clubs. And the players that were called need to arrive here and be desperate to perform, score goals, save, tackles, run more than the opponent, and to convince us to have the possibility to call again.
All right, that is Mauricio Pochettino, and putting a flag in the ground. Not that he hasn't already, but this feels even more certain with his beliefs and his convictions, Paul. And I love the going back to the Pelé, Maradona, Messi. Like, yeah, you can only question me if one of those guys isn't in, but not the rest. Which I thought was an interesting stance to take, but funny for me. I thought it was.
Look. He won the press conference today, Jimmy. He did. He won the. It's like when a coach gets hired for the first time in the NFL. Did they win the press conference? Like, I thought he did. And like that little smile in that answer right before he said, like, the players don't need to know. Like, they don't need an explanation. I thought was super interesting and enlightening. And not just about Mauricio Pochettino's approach to roster selection, which it is insightful in that way, but also in terms of like, what did he feel the value was in when he came in? What did he need to change? And he talked about that today in the press conference too. It was a little bit of, look, you know, there were too many players who felt like they had a place, that were resting on their accomplishments in the past. And the past doesn't matter and the future doesn't matter. It's what are you doing for me today? And I think that also the answers were indicative of a belief that the culture was, maybe there was a little bit too much power in the hands of those players as a result of that.
Right.
And so when you say, I don't need to explain anything to you, I'm the coach. Like, if you play well, you're coming. And if you don't play well and you're not in form, or maybe if I just don't rate you, you're not coming. And no one gets an explanation. And that creates a different level of a power dynamic.
Yeah.
We aren't friends. We aren't buddies. I'm not calling to chit chat with you. I'm your coach. And when you come in, you better perform for me or you're out.
Yeah. And in some ways, that's how it should be. And we could argue that under Greg Berhalter, he tried to shift it. And I think this was his. I remember, it's funny because it feels like it's so long ago that Greg was in charge. But in the middle of that, you could see that he was trying to build a club team out of the national team. And there's a lot of positives that you can take from that, right? The details are probably a little bit different. But you and I both know at the international level, sometimes less is more, or I would say more often than not, less is more. And you're just trying to get the most out of a really talented bunch of players to be aligned in a specific couple days or a couple games until you hit a World Cup where everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction. And it's just different. And it's interesting. Mauricio Pochettino comes from only the club scene, and now he's trying to take this into, okay, how do I manage an international team, a team that has been labeled? I mean, remember when they're doing press conferences early, like, we got to get tougher. We need to be harder. We need to make tackles. Like, that was a constant narrative. Like, they're answering those questions like every press conference. And what's the messaging behind the scenes? If that's what they're saying out loud, I mean, the underlying message is that they're soft, right? Or there may be some entitlement that creeped into the program, and that needs to get changed. And I'm sure Mauricio Pochettino and his coaching staff saw that and was like, okay, how do we do this delicately, and make sure that these guys continue to grow and get a little bit tougher? I wonder what we're going to look back on. I say all this. I wonder how it's going to look back on Mauricio Pochettino's time once it's all said and done. You know, we're a year removed from the next summer's World Cup. And oh man, maybe there was a lot more method to the madness than we thought. I don't know. I mean, yet to be seen. I do want to,
if I could address the question I just saw from Tony in the comment section on you know, what is their approach? How much are they talking to club managers? I do have a story coming at The Athletic with Henry Bushnell about this. You know, that is their philosophy. We don't need to over communicate with the players in between camps. But we do need to be in constant communication with the club coaches, with the staff of where they're working. So we know where they are mentally, physically, you know, where their form is, what they're being asked to do. They don't want to feel like they're interfering in the kind of day-to-day of the player at the club. They want them confident and flying high and focused on what their job is at the club level. Okay, let's get as much information as we can on that from their club coaches, from their clubs. And then when they're with us in camp, then we can build relationships. And I go back to what Tim Ream said ahead of the Gold Cup final, where he really praised Pochettino's and his staff's ability to interact with the players. And Tim said, you know, I really enjoy kind of sitting back and watching interactions. And what I noticed is they treat everybody the same, whether you're starting or whether you're not playing. And so there is relationship building. It's just so different from the way Greg went about it, where Greg was in constant contact, shooting texts, sending video.
Yeah.
He was also sending video saying, hey, think about this. We're going to work on this. So when the guys got to camp, they understood the concepts. And that to me is the biggest difference, is like, no, we're not going to worry about that when you're at your club. Focus on your club. And when you come with us, we'll introduce the concepts. I think it also speaks to the difference in how Pochettino is as a coach. When you hear the players, he tells them, listen, when you're on the ball, here's the idea of how we want to play, what we want to accomplish, but you find the solution. We're not going to tell you have to pass it here, you have to move here, no. If you're Yunus Musah, who's not here, but let's use him, and your strength is to dribble out of a problem, it might be a different way. Or let's say Serginho Dest to carry the ball forward out of a problem, it might be different to how, if we were playing Alex Freeman there and he's going to pass his way out of that problem and get running. So they want to give those options. And I think because there's not the specificity in the tactics, they don't need to they don't need to provide all that video early on.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot to dig into here, but let's get back to the roster really quick, because I know we got some big conversations coming in different positions per se. I'm going to look at the defenders. Max Arfson, one of the most capped players in 2025, and clearly has a trust from the coaching staff. And especially if we play in a back three, I just think he's even more valuable as a wing back than as an out and out fullback on the left side. But Jedi Robinson in, though, I wonder if and how his role changes. I assume Jedi would get the start, but Jedi is getting spot starts right now with Fulham, so maybe he's not at full health. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Cameron Carter-Vickers, first time back in since March, so we'll see what he does with this opportunity. We've all been kind of thirsting for him to take that next step. We see him do it at this club, right? Celtic leader, considered one of the best defenders in the league. When Big Ange was there, Postecoglou, he's like, this is the best defender in the league. And so, okay, let's see that version, CCV with the U.S. We got Mark McKenzie, kind of similar. Can you take this opportunity with both hands? I don't know if either one of them had done that in their last couple games with the U.S. Got Tim Ream, not a big surprise there. Chris Richards is the number one for sure. Tim Ream, I would say, is probably number two. But if we're going with the back three, who's that third one? As you mentioned before, Paul, it could be a James Sands. Maybe you could drop a Tanner Tessman there if you needed. It feels more of like a last gasp type thing than maybe out and out from the beginning. And then Miles Robinson gets his call back in. So curious to see what he does with that as well. The only big omission for me is Joe Scally from a defensive standpoint, because he's producing right now for Borussia Mönchengladbach. By the way, Borussia Mönchengladbach, not good right now. I believe they're on the bottom of the Bundesliga. They were down 6-0 this past weekend and ended up scoring 4 in the last 10 minutes, and Scally had 2 assists in that area. And he's playing a little bit higher up the field, kind of playing as a wing back. We all kind of see him here as maybe one of the back three. I'm pretty surprised because he's playing regularly, because on an individual level he's producing, even though his team's not playing well, that he's not in the team. And because he can be a little versatile and can play a couple different spots if we needed him to. And he's been solid for us, and I think he'd been solid for Mauricio Pochettino. He's like the one big omission from the defending side, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's like he is a guy. There's a few guys, in my opinion, who for some reason haven't been able to transfer their consistency and their level of play from the club to international. You mentioned one, Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think Scally's another one where he's been up. He's performed fairly well defensively. I think of like the Brazil friendly ahead of Copa America, maybe his best defensive performance for the U.S., but gives the ball away poorly against Jamaica that leads to a goal. You know, he struggles in other times. Johnny Cardoso, another one, playing great in Spain, comes to the U.S. and looks like he's never passed a ball before in his life. So I think there's a lack of trust there with Joe Scally. And if you don't feel like, you know, if he's not the right fit in the group and you don't really trust him fully on the field, okay, we're going to,
he's out.
Yeah, you're out. And also, I think this is probably a sign that they are leaning heavily toward the back three. And it's interesting because you're right in that Scally could play on the right side of a back three as a center back, equally to as a wing back. But in my mind, I think there's a chance that we end up seeing Tim Weah maybe getting some minutes at right wing back in this camp. And so if you're going to do that, you say, okay, I'm not going to bring another right back. I'm going to give those extra minutes to Weah, see how he can play there. And how does that open things up where we're playing Tillman and Pulisic behind a striker, but we want to get Tim Weah on the field, you know, and so we're going to have to play him at right wing back in certain moments. So I think that's probably some of the thinking. Where are we going to put these minutes in these 2 games? We don't have much time together. I'm really interested, Jimmy, in your take on like playing in a back three.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Chris Richards and Tim Ream. You know that. So you're a defender. You've played in the systems. What would you value in the third center back with those 2 guys, knowing that's 2/3 of the back three? Do you want another passer? Do you want athleticism and power? Like, you know, what should he
That's
be?
a great question. Yeah, I when I kind of let's say we reverse engineer what I think we could potentially see. We'll just say in the Ecuador game, if you had Antonee Robinson, then Tim Ream obviously have great chemistry, right? They played together for years. So there's like this real non-verbal understanding between the two. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Tim a little bit more on the left side. For me, I feel like when you play in the middle of a back three, you're going to probably be on the ball, well, potentially based on how you want to build out, but potentially on the ball a little bit more than the other two guys. And so Tim Ream's probably our best passer of the ball. So I could see why you'd want to maybe slot him in the middle of the three. So these are the decisions. Then you put Richards on the right, and you can put McKenzie on the left, who plays that for his club at Toulouse. But then you lose out on potentially those little hidden dynamics and chemistry moments between Tim Ream and Jedi, who played off each other's shoulders for so long. I would want to lean into that experience. So that would be a little bit of it. So I would have potentially Richards, McKenzie on the right, or excuse me, on the left, Richards on the right, and then Tim Ream in the middle. But maybe you take away a little bit of Tim's. This is one thing, like because when I played in the World Cup, I was the left-sided center back in a back four, but I'm a right footer. So for me to hit the big switch, Paul, I have to, and to do it with my right foot, I now have to open up my whole body, and now it's not as deceptive. If I'm on the left side and I can hit that with my left foot, it's harder for the defense to maybe sit on it because they can't see that it's coming. Or I can maybe hit with my. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, you don't have to turn and open up.
I don't
and
have
take
to
that
turn
extra touch.
exactly. I don't have to hit. Oh, you're exactly right. So or if you're gonna do it, you got to do it quick, which is what I made sure I was an expert at. Knowing that was probably my best position to slot next to Eddie Pope or Oguchi Onyewu and to be really good at that. And so I worked on it. But when you maybe take away that deceptiveness from Tim Ream, that might not allow us as a team for him to hit the big switch, that deceptive big switch that could unlock, if they're trying to trap us on one side of the field. So all these are the things, the details that I'm thinking about. And so, okay, let's say we have Tim Ream on the left, and you put Richards in the middle, then I would want a guy on the right side that could hit that big switch the other way. It just gives us more that deceptive big switch, and which guy can fit that in. Because imagine if you had Antonee Robinson kind of floating on the other side, we're trying to get trapped, and then somebody can hit that deceptive big switch the other way. Now we got Jedi to 1v1 situation with some space. Yeah, sign me up for that. Inject that straight into my veins. So I would want a little bit of an IQ for the game to know and recognize when that's on, and then obviously having the ability to execute that switch. So that would be the player profile that I would look at, and not to say you need that. You're not going to be looking for it every single game or every single moment, but just there's that one or two moments, maybe per half, that if you hit that could really unlock another team. And that's going to be the difference, Paul. Like we get out of the group stages, but once we get into the round of 32, round of 16, yeah, it's win or go home. Those little details matter, and they matter in such a big way. So, wow, you unlocked me there. I usually ask.
No, I mean, I love it because these are the things that you need to be thinking about, especially at the World Cup. And by the way, you also have it at the World Cup for the group stage because you have all this time to prepare for the opponent. True. And so you can start thinking through, and I look back at, we just have to go to 2022. They played Iran. What'd they do? Cameron Carter-Vickers comes into the starting lineup because why? Berhalter says, oh, well, he plays at a club where they have the ball all the time. They play against a low block. He knows the types of passes he needs to be looking for. Walker Zimmerman, who had played pretty well, gave up the penalty against Wales, but had played pretty well. You're out. Cam Carter-Vickers, you're in. So those types of matchups, those types of ideas of, hey, we notice that this right back creeps a little bit, loses it. We need someone that can hit that ball quickly to Anthony or can find that pass on the left side. That matters. And so the question is, one, do you have a third center back that can hit that ball? Two, if you think Richards and Reams are the two guys, then maybe it does become a guy like Joe Scally, who you say, okay, maybe we give up a little bit defensively, but we want the best player on the ball that we can in the middle of that back line. It'll be interesting to see how much he experiments with those types of players in this window and in November and March.
Yeah, it's going to be, lots to talk about like always. So listen, we're going to take our first break. Call what you want. When we come back, we're going to break it down some more because we haven't even talked about the forwards yet. So keep it right here.
Saturday kicks off at noon, and it's big time. First, Air Force and Navy face off in Annapolis. Then it's big time at the Rose Bowl when UCLA hosts Penn State.
When you are asking me about players that are not in the squad or in the roster, it's because I think in your mind you believe that they have right to be here. I think we need to respect the player at 26. If not, we are going to start to ask to the social media why is not one player or another and decide about that. Maybe you can ask me why Messi is not in the roster, no? This type of player, Maradona, Pelé, I don't know. But when you are talking about, different names, I think you need to respect the players that are here.
That's the quote. Oh, man, that's funny. It's just some guy. Like, if you're just talking to me about some guy, you don't have any right to question me. Let's just focus on the 26. Gotta love Mauricio Pochettino. Coming in hot with this. He won the press conference in your mind, Paul.
He did. He won the press conference.
He was solid and gave some good answers. Now, you had a chance to ask him about Christian Pulisic. Is that right?
Yeah,
I did. What did he say about Christian? I'm curious.
Well, I just want to take a breath here because that's what it felt like this was when it came to Christian Pulisic. Think about where we were less than 4 months ago. Mauricio Pochettino and Christian Pulisic. It felt like this relationship was frayed. You had Christian saying, I don't know why you didn't want to bring me. I wanted to come for the pre-tournament friendlies. You had Mauricio saying, I'm not a mannequin. I'm the coach. I decide who comes in. Today, he said he is the best player on our team. That's what he said. He is the best player in this team. And I think, and let's not forget, by the way, where Christian said that. He said it right here with CBS.
Call what you want, baby.
That's right. And I think that is really important, that moment of acknowledgement of, look, like, this guy is really important to everything we do. And we haven't really heard Mauricio Pochettino say that. I think there has been purpose behind that. It goes to, the quote about Messi and Pelé. It goes to what he was talking about, if no one should feel like they have a role, what you did in the past doesn't matter. Well, Christian Pulisic said what he said. He rested. He said, I promise you, it's worth it. Trust me. I'm more motivated than ever. I'm hungrier. He's showing it. He's playing really well.
Out of his mind.
And so it's like, all right, he backed it up. And now Pochettino's saying, yep, okay, you're my guy. You're the most important player on this team, is what he said. And he also said he caught himself, and he smiled again because he caught himself saying, we have to have him ready for the World Cup. And he says, oh, you might say Mauricio, but no one has a spot on the team. But he goes, we have to call it what it is. Like, he's going to be at the World Cup. So, I think this is an important acknowledgement. They have to, though, Jimmy, find a way to unlock Christian the way he has been at Milan. Christian wants to play inside. He wants to be a number 10. I think he's at his best when he can get in space, when he can run at people, when he can dribble at guys. We can, go after those one-on-one matchups.
Wait, really quick before you keep going. Were you pleased with how he performed against Japan? Because we went to a back three. He's tucked in a little bit more centrally. I thought he did an excellent job, especially in setting up Balogun for his goal, catching the ball in the half turn, and then just driving into that space.
That's exactly what they need him to do.
Yeah, exactly right. So I didn't know if that was a performance that you liked from Christian.
Yeah, it is. But you need to make sure that you can get that consistently. And I think also when you bring Antonee now back into the lineup and you have Dest, like that should cause enough headaches and overloads on the wings that it does open up space. But Christian has to be aggressive. He has to have that mindset instead of sometimes, I think a lot in the last window when he played centrally, they were able to kind of bracket him and deny him the ball, and he'd get frustrated. He'd start dropping deeper and deeper to get on the ball. Like, no, stay high, find those spaces, trust that they'll find you. And I thought he did a much better job of that against Japan, but that has to be the focus. If you're committing to this back three, making sure things are still running through Pulisic is important.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's a great shot. Well, speaking of Christian, I wanted to use that as a segue into the forwards. We got Patrick Agyemang, who he clearly adores, Mauricio Pochettino. We got Flo Balogun coming back in, obviously red hot and played very well in his time in the last window. Christian's in. Tim Weah is in. Zendejas, who's been red hot for club and country, scoring like career-defining goals. I mean, I still can't believe he chipped Keylor Navas from 18 yards out. I don't know if you haven't seen it yet, everybody. Go look up the Club America Pumas highlights. It's at the end. Ridiculous. What a goal. He was on the show. He talked about it earlier this week. And then Haji Wright getting the call. So I'm excited to see how these players are utilized. Christian for sure is going to be in. And then the big question is, who's next to him? Malik Tillman should, I think, be involved in the forward section. But we'll bring him into the conversation here, and Diego Luna. And then who's going to be Balogun? So I think Balogun and Christian would start against Ecuador. And then it's just who's going to, if we're playing a back three, who's that other inverted winger? Who's that like second 10 next to Christian? Who are you leaning towards based on, what's your spidey sense telling you, Paul Tenorio?
I think it has to be Malik Tillman, right? He played so well for you at the Gold Cup. I think that Pochettino has shown a kind of loyalty to those types of players. He misses the last camp. As he's trying to get settled back in his new club at Leverkusen in Germany, I think it'll be him. The question then becomes, what do you do on the right side of the wing back? Do you take Tim Weah off?
Yeah,
the field?
that's what I was going to say. Right.
Do you put Freeman on? Where do you? I would guess. This is my guess that you start Tim Weah at the right wing back spot in the first game, and you see, can we attack with Weah the way we want to, or is he a little bit too uncomfortable? Are we losing too much defensively? Especially if you don't trust all of your center backs, where we're gonna go with Freeman. But I think it'll be those two, and I think that's the right call. I do think Weah, as much as I don't always love Christian being inside, I think Weah needs to be out on the touchline. I really don't like when he gets played on the left side because he's coming inside too much.
Right.
And he's been so effective at driving to the end line, serving dangerous balls back into the box.
Yeah,
I think he could be a really good fit there. I don't know. Do you think who else is an option? You think Diego Luna has a shot at it? You think Weah?
No. I think Luna has kind of shown what he's going to show for the national team. Yeah, there could be moments where he could step up and play, but I see him when I start to project how I think the World Cup's going to play out next summer, which is really fun to do, especially 8 months out, 7 months out. But I don't see him as a starter for us. I could see him, unless somebody's hurt or if there's a yellow card situation, maybe you throw him in. But ultimately, I see him coming off the bench. Based on the situation, do we have a lot more of the ball? Do we need to break down a low block? What are we seeing there? That's where I think Diego Luna could be really efficient for us. But he's not the number one guy. I agree with you. I think it'll probably be Tillman. I'd like to see Tillman and Pulisic. And if you have Weah without Dest here because of injury, you put Weah out there. Freeman's kind of your backup. Arsene will now be your backup for Jedi. And now then, really the big conversation with Balogun up top. So who are the 2 sixes without Adams? And then who's going to play, and what does the back three look like? If you have Ream and Richards, who's playing that basically right-sided? For me, it's probably between, there's 3 options. You have McKenzie, CCV, and you have Miles Robinson. So you have those are your 3 options. And again, it could be opponent-based. And that's always, I think I said this before in the previous podcast, but what I do admire about Spain's and the French team and all that stuff, speaking of which, the US U20s beat France 3-0 today. Shout out to the squad that got it done. Yeah, that's awesome. We can talk about that a little later, but that just happened a little, and I'm stoked because obviously France is stacked. But what I admire about that, they're so deep in every single position, so you could potentially roll out whoever based on the opponent, and or like you mentioned about CCB in the World Cup. Hey, we're going to play against the low block. This player is a better fit for what we're going to face, and so yeah, I don't know. I think we'll see Weah and Tillman. And that's ultimately what I'd like to see. Well, plenty of time to get into our starting 11 stuff. But
you brought up a good point, though, right? Because this formation, you're saying, okay, who are the 2 deeper midfielders, the 2 sixes, as you said? Like, is Weston a fit for that spot? He likes to kind of move, meander, kind of push forward a little bit. He likes to be that late arriving run in the box. Do we see him in the starting lineup? Do we see him on the field in that role? Do we have to be playing a back 4? And having kind of the 4-2-3-1 look to have Weston McKennie in the game? Because if you want 2 guys who are going to sit deeper, and you probably do because your wing backs are going to be pushing up the field, it's more likely that you see Tanner Tessman and Aiden Morris stepping into that type of role than you do Weston McKennie.
Right. I agree with you 100%. I think Weston's a player that could get squeezed in the system for sure. Like we talked about before, like if you really going to go with the wingbacks, and we could argue we have, when Dest is healthy and fired and Jedi's doing the same, we have 2 of the most dynamic wingbacks definitely in North America. Obviously Jedi's proven himself in the Premier League too. I mean, we have really, really, really good wingbacks. So let's lean into that strength, but that means we have to lose a midfielder. And the Yunus Musah, Weston McKennie, those are the kind of guys that could get squeezed because you most likely need 2 sixes to hold it down. in front of a back three, right? So they can help cover, and we can maybe take more risk in trying to create overloads and when we're trying to get forward out wide. What's interesting though, and you weren't on this, Paul, when I talked about this, but I thought what Christian Roldan did really well against Japan is that he sat so that Tyler Adams could go hunt. And Tyler Adams for me is at his best when he can hunt. When you're asking him to sit, you can just feel that he's got like itchy fingers, man. He just wants to, like, when can I go? Just release me. I want to run, you know? And the dude's a greyhound. He wants to just go track the ball. And if you get him all, you know, keep him on a leash, that's not as cool for him. Like, he can do it, but it's not what he loves to do. So when I think about that position, yeah, if you can have an aggressive six, but when I think about Musah and Weston McKennie doing that, they don't do it the same way Tyler does. So if you really going to, for sure, if we talk about Christian already booking his ticket to the World Cup, Tyler Adams is going to be right there next to him. Great. Then this is really an audition for who can really sit in that hole and allow a Tyler Adams-like player to go and hunt. And I think this is going to be an interesting window to figure that out. So
hearing you say that, Jimmy, it makes me think about, I've had some conversations with some of the older heads in the U.S. soccer alumni pool. And I remember talking to somebody about Chris Armas, and what people loved so much about Armas when they played with him was he knew his strengths and he knew his weaknesses, and he knew exactly what was being asked of him when he was on the field. And so he just did that really, really well. And if not for injury, he would have been at the World Cup because he was able to do that really, really well. And I think Christian Roldan is that type of guy. He's super smart. He understands the dynamics of the entire team around him. He knows when he's on the field, this is your job. Do this really, really well. Sit deep, protect the back line, don't lose the ball, and allow the guys around you to do their job the best that they can. On top of that, he is one of the most beloved guys in the pool. He is a glue guy to a very high degree, you know, and that's not, by the way, that's not like, oh, he's a glue guy with the MLS guys trying to break in. No, like, he is close with Christian Pulisic. He's close with the bigger names in this team as well. They really respect him. They lean on him. And if there was another guy besides Christian Pulisic who got praised at today's press conference, it was Christian Roldan. You know, this is another guy who Pochettino had to stop himself to say, well, we don't know. We'll see whether he's still here in November. But if he keeps doing what he did in September, he'll be here. And I thought that was notable as well, that this is another coach who's come in and immediately fell in love with what Roldan brings to the group away from the field and when he's on it. He understands his role. And he, again, wasn't just on the field role. When he didn't play, he saw the way Roldan acted to the rest of the team in that moment as well. So we talked about Aiden Morris, Tanner Tessman, Johnny Cardoso. Watch out for Christian Roldan.
For sure. Now I want to address a comment from Tony C, who says, so I'm going to paraphrase here unless it gets pops back up, but how is Weston on the outs? Seriously. For me, I don't know what happened in the March. We know that we lost those 2 games, but I feel like, and Paul, maybe you can shed some light on this, there was some fundamental things that happened behind the scenes off the field that maybe soured Mauricio Pochettino's perspective on a few players in the player pool. And some of those players have now had to fight through whatever that was to win back their respect or whatever it is. That feels a little bit dramatic, but just to kind of win them back over. Now, when I think about Weston McKennie, this seems to be a somewhat of a MO, right? Where you're seeing patterns and habits here where he's kind of on the outs, right, at his club, and then he wins him over. And then he's on the outs with the new manager, and then he wins him over. And then he's on the outs, and he wins him over. And I feel like this might be happening again, just with the national team level. And we're going to see this. I agree with you. You said at the very beginning, Paul, this is a big window, I think, for Weston McKennie for a lot of different reasons. But there's something going on because he's one of the players that I felt like should have been a part of the September window and wasn't. And I wonder how that is going to look. And I don't know if we see him start against Ecuador. Maybe it's a formation thing, but maybe it's just, hey, if you're coming back into the team, you got to show me, and you got to tick all the boxes that I'm looking for, right? It's not just what you do on the field. It's how you fit into the group and how you're impacting the group and how you're influencing the group and whatever is happening. It just feels like there's something there. And it's more of a, I don't know. I don't know if you
Well,
have anything to add to that, Paul.
You can be a little bit aloof, or you can have issues off the field as long as you're winning games, man. Like, why was March a disaster? March was a disaster because they lost to Panama and they lost to Canada. They win those games. They win the Nations League. No one's talking about, like Mauricio Pochettino's his own words, right? Oh, you can come into camp and it's not here to see family and go golfing, right? Like, you can see family and go golfing if you're lifting the trophy at the end.
Yeah.
I would also say, I mean, this is going to, you alluded to this too. Like, if we take what we know, which is that Mauricio Pochettino's staff is in constant contact with the club teams, and we take the last 3 years of history of Weston McKennie at Juve, it seems like they've unlocked the best way to motivate Weston McKennie at Juve. Every year he shows up to preseason and he's got no locker, no parking spot. He's off training with the youth. And then a month later, he's starting in Champions League.
Yeah,
and once
fair.
again,
Great point.
What happened? They left him out. He missed September camp because he wasn't playing at Juve again. They were going to move him again, and they didn't. And this week, he started in the Champions League. It's the same formula. Maybe Pochettino's saying, all right, I'll try that. Weston, you're out. Make you want it. And then, all right, now you're back in, and we've created that motivation within you, Juve style.
No, it's a good shit. Good shout. Not good shit. Good shit and good shout, I guess I should say. All right, we put up a poll saying, how are you feeling about this roster with green dot, neutral, and red dot? Because we got to give a shout out to green dots and red dots as much as possible. Green dot is leading with 50%, neutral 42%, only 8% for red dots. So everybody listening here on your podcast platform of choice, that is our poll we're putting up. Pretty positive, I would say, all things considered. Now, there was one more piece of sound that I wanted to hear from Mauricio Pochettino, and it was about kind of assessing the fitness and durability of the players in the player pool. So let's hear what he had to say about that.
Also thinking in a tournament like the World Cup that you need to play every 3-4 days. And if we are thinking into preparing to play not only the first 3 games, if not to go further in the competition, also we need to see players that have the possibility, to play every 3 games. That is why we are assessing player. We call player that with the possibility that every 3 days they can perform again, and they can perform again, because we are seeing that too many players that can be involved with us, they cannot play 2 games or 3 games in a week, and that is really we need to be careful when we are going to build the squad. That is why we are trying to be very focus and assess in the way that we need to build a strong squad with 26 players that can perform every 3 days. Because if not, I think we can put in a dangerous situation to the national team.
All right, if I'm picking up what he's putting down, Paul, Gio Reyna's out.
Low blow.
The guy can't stay healthy, so if you can't trust him to play every 3 days, so I love all this info, and this is why we brought in a lot more sound from Mauricio Pochettino than maybe we usually do on a normal show, is because he's giving us filters for how he's going to pick his team, right? And he's mentioned he gives us little bits and pieces. It's like the E.T. movie, and maybe that's dating me now, because maybe a lot of our listeners don't even know what E.T. is, but pieces, trails of how things are going to go. This is how he's going to find his team. And that is a big piece of information with regard to, I am looking through this lens. This is my filter. I need guys that I can trust to play at a high level every 3 days. And when you start to look at the roster, like, all right, that probably rules out that guy, Gio Reyna. And that rules out, that guy can't stay healthy so it's interesting as you start to add these filters and layers and lenses to what he's saying and what he's looking for. You start to kind of iron out what you think the team is going to look like. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it also speaks to what we've continued to hit on in this thing, which is this podcast, which is they are strategizing right now for the World Cup. They are starting to put those little pieces together. They're looking deeply into this. And that, again, speaks to, I think, what they've been asking of us, the outsiders, to remember, like, we have a plan. Like, that's kind of, he said a few times, like, we're experts. We've done this before. We've been successful. Trust us. And it's hard to trust the process when the results aren't there.
Yeah.
And, that's why, but look, people are trusting one win against Japan, which, by the way, subbed out all 11 of their starters, 50% green dots.
You don't need to bring up that part, Paul. You can leave that part out.
50% green dots. Like, people are starting to say, okay, this roster looks a little bit closer to what I'm envisioning. Maybe I do trust the process. Maybe he does have an idea of what he's trying to put together, and we're starting to see that vision. And I do think that, like, when I got the roster in my inbox, I thought, okay, I'm starting to see the vision for where this team is going. I'm feeling a little bit better about that he's seeing the pecking order the way I'm seeing the pecking order, which of course must mean he's right, of course. But yeah, it gives you a little bit more buy-in. Okay, got to go beat Ecuador and Australia, so that buy-in continues. But we certainly are getting some ideas of what he's looking for sure.
No, I mean, listen, when he went to a back three and it worked, I'm telling you, I'm like a proud dad over here. He's listening to the show and he's going with what we're saying. Is the best. It is the absolute best. So long may that continue, because obviously if we get thumped by Ecuador, we're going to be like, what? Back three sucks, or whatever it might be. All right, that's it. We're going to take our next break and call what you want. Our last break and call what you want. When we come back, we're going to get into a little Open Cup final, because I was there and I talked to Mauricio Pochettino and I shook his hand. And I also talked to Matthew McConaughey, and it was pretty rad. So don't go anywhere.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale! Ronaldo! Wonderful goal!
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
All right, welcome back in to Call What You Want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Paul Tenorio, who is filling in for both Tony Meola and Charlie Davies. Hey, those are some big shoes to fill. Big, but
that's going on the resume. That's going on the resume.
It should like top of your CV. I filled in for Tony Meola and Charlie Davis, and I did it great, admirably. I was killing it, and you're absolutely killing it today. So we appreciate you coming on and helping us out. All right, let's talk about the U.S. Open Cup final. Let's talk about the game itself. Nashville won their first ever trophy, the first ever trophy for a professional sports team in Tennessee. They did it 2-1, and there was a little controversy in there, but overall, I thought that even though I didn't think Nashville played their best game, and they came into this, by the way, losing 6 straight games away from home in all competitions, they found a way to make the plays that they needed to make, and their 2 best players made those plays. Sam Sturridge scored the penalty. He ended up having like the second assist for Hani Mukhtar's first goal. And Austin FC had some spurts there. They scored a very good goal right before halftime to make it 1-1. You thought, oh, man, they're going to kick on in the second half. But there was a controversial penalty, in my humble opinion. There was 2, actually. The one, Austin got one in the first half, which I didn't think was a penalty, but Uzuni missed it, and so it doesn't feel the same way. But when the second one got called on a corner kick that was in favor of Nashville, Sam Sturridge stepped up and scored it, then you feel like Nashville won the battle of 2 questionable penalties. The penalty itself, if you didn't see it, was on a corner kick. And it's like holding in the NFL. You can call holding on every single play, I feel like. And so when corner kicks happen, free kicks happen from out wide, there's just going to be some tangling of arms and legs and people holding each other. It just depends on who you're staring at that particular moment. And is it egregious enough to change the course of a game? For me, that's not a foul. When you see it, not a foul for me in preseason, not a foul for me in the regular season, and definitely shouldn't decide a final. I don't want to take anything away from Nashville. I think where I'm disappointed on was that goal decided a final. And I want those types of games to be decided by something else. And so it was a little bit unfortunate that happened, but super stoked for Nashville and everybody involved there.
This is where we miss Charlie. Because you're a center back. I was a right back. Never am I going to be in favor of pretty much almost any penalty that's called, but let alone a ticky-tack penalty, on service into the box. Nor do I think Tony would be in favor of a penalty like this. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, ultimately, when we see finals, you want it determined and not kind of the subjective view of a play where if you were to go into VAR every single time, you could say, oh, there's a jersey pull up, there's a pick play, there's something that could be whistled. But yeah, I mean, I come from a defender's perspective.
Yeah, same. I'm the same. I just wanted the game to be won with something special, and it just didn't happen. I felt like the first half was awesome. You got 2 very good goals. You had a missed penalty. There was some action to talk about, and it felt like everything to play for in the second half. And then that gets called, and I was in the stadium, and nobody knew what was happening. It was so innocuous. You're like, wait, what? What's going on? And then they called what? On who? On what? Like nobody saw anything because it just was. It just didn't feel. And then when you watch the replay, it just was soft. It's just a soft way to decide a game. And I still feel like Nashville probably were the better team on the night, or maybe slightly better. And they made the plays that made the difference. And you create your own luck. And I know all those cliches. And I don't want, honestly, I say this because I don't want to take anything away from them. Because winning a trophy is something that nobody can ever take away from you. And I've won a few, and I make sure I flex on everybody when I have the opportunity. But I just wish the game was decided in a different way. And I think Nashville fans can agree on that, but they don't really care. They want it. All right. So BJ Callahan has now coached in 2 big finals, Nations League final and the Open Cup final. He's won both. What do you shout out to BJ Callahan. Guy knows how to win in finals. And he was great. We got to interview him both before and after the game. Very gracious with his time and very humble in his victory as well, and giving all the credit to his players. Top guy. And it was fun to talk with him. I also had the opportunity. Matthew McConaughey came on. And here's a good story for everybody. So we're talking to Matthew McConaughey. He's right off my left shoulder, and I'm turning here, and I don't see what's behind me. And so somebody bumps me to like kind of get out of the way. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm talking to Matthew McConaughey. Who's bumping me right now? And I turn, and it's Mauricio Pochettino. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. You can come on in, Mauricio. So it was great. It was a great kind of spontaneous moment where we all got to talk soccer, of course. And here, look at this photo that everybody's seeing. If you can't see it, I'll post it on my Instagram at some point. But I got Matthew McConaughey and Mauricio Pochettino hanging on to my every word right here. And I feel like I peaked, Paul. I peaked at this point.
I was very impressed with your form the whole interview through. You had a little bit of contact with Matthew McConaughey when you were talking to him. Make sure he was locked in with you.
Yes.
You gave him a nice compliment after you were right. A very good question from Matthew McConaughey to Mauricio Pochettino. You guys were like, you were on the desk together. You had it going. You had the chemistry, baby.
I love it. I love that. You're welcome on the show anytime, Paul.
That's right. You're locking him up for the World Cup. Matthew McConaughey is going to be on Call It What You Want World Cup live streams, baby.
We got to get him a Call It What You Want t-shirt. That's for sure. But yeah. So here's the question for everybody. Please answer this in the chat right now. Paul, I want to hear from you. Which Hollywood actor would you want for a pregame pep talk? Is there? So it's funny. I don't know if I would go with a Hollywood actor. I'd almost want them in character. You know, so I'm a big Lebowski fan. I just think it would be funny to have, Jeff Bridges come out and as the dude and give a speech before a big game.
What? That's a Jimmy Conrad pick right there.
That would be amazing. No, listen. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan too. So there'll probably be some Wes Anderson characters that I think would be funny to have involved too. But I don't know why the dude stuck out, just because he'd be so low key and be like, whatever, man. And then he'd almost give you permission to just relax and have fun, man. F it. Let's go bowling. So there's an element of that. I'd be so jacked for a big game. I wouldn't need somebody to rah me into getting jacked up. I'd already be jacked up. So to have somebody to give me some balance,
Now you're just flirting with Matthew McConaughey and hoping he's watching the podcast. Because that was his answer. Sometimes you got to know when to give him rah-rah, and sometimes you got to know when to just keep it down. He's right there with you. I love this answer. Bill Murray would be great. Yeah, I thought rah-rah right away. So I was thinking of the coach from Friday Night Lights. Kyle is his first name. I forget the last name of the actor. Kyle Chandler as the coach from Friday Night Lights. But if you want someone to kind of bring it back down, give a little levity, you got to go with a comedian. And who better than Bill Murray? I live a mile from Wrigley Field. Every time Bill Murray talks to the Cubs fans before a game, when he shouts at them from the press box, either before the game or during seventh inning stretch, it gets everybody going in the right way. So I think Bill Murray would be a good one.
Yeah, Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is an obvious choice too, and I think Roy Kent would be fun too. If like say you didn't, I would almost want Roy Kent at halftime. Like if you didn't have a good first half, just somebody come in and just give it to you, just kick you in the ass. Like, all right, let's cut through feeling sorry for ourselves and let's get after it. So Roy Kent would be probably my halftime shout. But Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter for a pregame speech. Yeah, I love that. Little Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure would be interesting. Who played who's the one, the Miracle actor who played Herb Brooks, the coach of the 1980 U.S. hockey team? That guy was on.
Kill me that I can't
think of his name. Kurt Russell. He was very good in that one as well. Anyway, that was the way we were going to end this show. Paul, thank you so much for coming on. and hanging out with us today, breaking down the roster. Very excited about it. Lots of green dots, a lot of neutrals, not so many red dots. So everybody's, as you mentioned, very excited or cautiously optimistic about our way forward, which is awesome. And hopefully we perform well. We got one plug here for you. Juventus is taking on AC Milan. That's happening on Sunday at 2:45 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. That is Weston McKennie versus Christian Pulisic. Yes, and please. That should be a lot of fun. Hopefully Weston gets to start in that one so they can compete against each other. And then we're coming back and joining. We're gonna come back live for you on Tuesday. We'll get Big Tones and Chasing Charlie back on the show and get their thoughts about this roster and how excited they are for these upcoming games. But yeah, that's it. Calling it a show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you again, Paul Tenorio. Make sure you go read all the stuff at The Athletic. And producer Des, thanks for hanging out with us and making this all work. And we love you guys. Great community. And that's it. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you on the other side of it. Later. Peace out.